So, welcome to another public live stream session. And man, do I have some confession to make? And like many of you watching this video, I wasn't born into a rich family. My family and I immigrated to the US in the late 90s. And I remember how much we didn't have. But we were fortunate to have support from my grandparents, who also immigrated to the US, but they already lived in the US for over 20 years by the 90s. My grandparents came to the US in the late 1970s and worked their butts off because they believed in the American dream. They believed this country would give them a better life than where they were before. My grandfather passed away 2 years ago at the age of 94, and then my grandmother passed away about 8 months later at the age of 95. And they were married for almost 70 years. And when I came to the US, I couldn't speak any English at all. So naturally, I got picked on at school. I graduated from high school with no intentions of going to college. So I decided to enlist in the Air Force at the age of 18. And it was a few years after the 9/11 attacks happened. And I got my US citizenship. I got fluent in English. And then I made some bad financial decisions. And this was me in 2014, right in the middle of paying off my debt. And there were times when I thought, oh man, I'm never going to pay off my debt. And I had ups and downs, but I was living on almost nothing that year. And then this was in December 2015 with my daughter at her daycare center. And I looked much happier because I just sent my last check to pay off my very last debt. And it took me 2 whole years to pay everything off. And what have I been doing since I paid off my debt in 2016? I took my daughter to Disneyland, Legoland, Disney World, and Disney Cruise. My wife and I traveled to New York, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and so many different places and cash flow my travel without ever taking out any more debt, right? I'm going to be 37 this year, and my wife and I now collectively have over 7 figures in total assets, which include our retirement accounts. And I didn't do anything special. I started to save and invest at least 50% of my income after I paid off my debt at the end of 2015. My income didn't stay at $61,000 after 2015. It just continued to increase every year because I found opportunities to raise my income after getting a bachelor's degree at the age of 33. It also took another 6 months to build my emergency fund and then another 6 months to build my travel fund, annual expenses fund, and other sinking funds. And I started to build a business mindset by creating several side hustles to increase my income. And I didn't build my net worth in just a year, but it's taken me over 10 years to get to where I am now. And my journey started in 2013 when I realized that I could no longer live paycheck to paycheck. And over the years, people have asked me how I was able to save and invest from zero to $1.1 million. And I've got questions like how I'm going to retire early with 3.7 million and how I created several income streams over the years. I even got questions if I ever got an inheritance from my family. I can tell you that I never got a single dollar from my family. I never once bragged or show off my income on this channel because that's not the intent at all. It's all about the process and the mindset behind the financial independence movement. The sky is literally the limit if you have a plan and the will to do whatever it takes to grow your wealth. And I'm only able to get to where I am now because I made a crucial decision back in 2013, which is to pay off $110,000 in consumer debt. And I had $110,000 in credit card debt, personal loans, car loans, and a TSP loan, which is also known as the 401k loan. And I made a decision to sacrifice 2 years of my life from 2014 to 2016 to completely pay off $110,000 in total consumer debt. And I wanted to do whatever it took to pay it off. I sold everything and lived on nothing until I got that debt paid off. What I'm really glad I didn't do was file for bankruptcy when I could have, because that would have been much more devastating for my finances and potentially my military career at the time. And take a look at this one more picture of me from 10 years ago. In 2013, I looked like a freaking dork at my job's holiday party. And I was on active duty in the military at the time. And I knew that I was in serious financial trouble. I didn't tell my employer about it. My family and friends had no idea at the time that I had so much debt, making only $58,000 a year. I was living paycheck to paycheck, making minimum payments on every single debt that I had. It was probably the darkest time of my life. And it took a big toll on my mental health and prevented me from doing a lot of things that I wanted to do. And I was smiling in this picture. I look ridiculous, by the way. But in my mind, I was thinking about how I was going to tackle my $110,000 in total debt while I was in the middle of a divorce. This picture means something to me because my stress level was 10 out of 10 going into the new year, despite the smile I showed in this picture. And my debt actually increased from 80,000 to $108,000 when my divorce was finalized. But by no means am I blaming my entire financial mistakes on my divorce. Some of the debt was because of the divorce, but most of it was because I had a serious spending problem. And I think a lot of people can share similar experiences that when you go through a major life changing event, that is the most vulnerable time for someone to make a financial mistake or multiple financial mistakes. The biggest downside of all was how much I slowed down on the progress of my retirement savings because of the debt that I had. Let me know in the comment section down below about your experience with debt so far. And this is the screenshot of my debt from December 2013. I still keep a copy of it as a reminder of my past. I had a Capital One MasterCard with $6,000 in balance. I had a military Star Card with over $8,000 in balance. If you've ever served in the military Star Card is pretty much the first thing you'll learn about when you get to your first assignment. And I think they are just as predatory as any credit cards. And I also had another Capital One Visa and with almost $9,000 in total balance. And I remember using this credit card mostly for eating out and buying drinks. Yeah. And I had a Chase Freedom Card with almost $12,000 in balance. And keep in mind that every single one of my 5 credit cards was completely maxed out or over the credit limit. Not to mention the USAA credit card with almost $12,000 in balance. I had anywhere between 20 and 28% in interest for these credit cards. My minimum payment was $120 every month, but out of that 120, $80 of that was going to the interest and $40 to the principal. And I was not going to be able to pay off the credit cards for like 30 or 40 years by making minimum payments. And I also had a 2013 Honda Civic with a balance of almost $23,000. The minimum payment was $313, and that's for 60 months. And I just got that car, so it slowly became a burden on me. The Acura loan here was actually from the divorce with a balance of almost $20,000. Did I need 2 cars? Of course not. And I'll tell you how I got rid of it in the next segment of this live stream, so make sure to stay tuned. The next one was the TSP loan right here, which is the same as the 401k loan. TSP stands for Thrift Savings Plan, which is the federal government version of the 401k. A 401k is for employees working in the private sector, and TSP is for members of the armed forces and civilian employees of the federal government. And I remember taking out $12,000 under the what's called a hardship rule so that I could pay for my everyday expenses. And the last one was a personal loan with USAA. And I borrowed $9,000 for 60 months. And the interest rate was outrageous at 12% because I had a poor credit score. And I needed that money to pay for my divorce attorney. And I'll tell you that, man, it'll cost you 20 bucks to get married, but a fortune to get divorced. And needless to say, I no longer do any banking with USAA. And it was in August 2013 at my daughter's first birthday party when I finally had that moment when I said, you know what, I've had it. And I just couldn't live paycheck to paycheck anymore. And I was angry, bitter, depressed. I didn't like myself and where I was financially as a 27-year-old man on active duty in the military. And I was also embarrassed about my finances. So I never told my coworkers, my family, or my friends about my financial crisis. And I remember looking at my 1 year old daughter at the time and feeling like a complete failure. And I told myself that I needed to do better for myself and my daughter's future. And I was starting a new chapter of my life as a single guy. So I was determined to make some major changes. And I want you to take a guess at my credit score in 2013. What do you think it was? I'll give you a minute, okay? And it was, ready? 578 when I looked at it. And I couldn't take out any more loans, credit cards, or anything else to pay for my lifestyle anymore. My payment history was actually in an excellent category because I never missed a payment in my life. But it was the credit usage or the amounts owed that was killing my credit score. My credit card usage was at 99%. So I literally had nothing more left in my credit limit. On one of my credit cards, I had a credit limit of $12,000 and I had a balance of $12,050. And I was completely out of control. Now, 10 years later, in 2023, my credit score is now about 825, 830 because I paid off all of my debt except for my mortgage. And I never put myself into that situation again. And before I get into the details of how I tackle my debt in the next segment of this live stream, I want to share the steps I took in 2013 to get my debt free journey started on January 1st, 2014. Step number one was to take full responsibility for my actions. This was the hardest thing that I had to do because I used to blame everyone else but myself. I had to take a great mental step to admit to my spending problem. And I had a serious spending problem, and no one else could fix it but me. And step number two was to find resources that could help me get out of debt. The very first book I read was The Millionaire Next Door. That's why I have that book on display on my bookshelf because it made a huge impact on how I look at finances. The book offered practical advice on finding financial success and building generational wealth. It was published back in 1996, and I still find the book very relevant today. This is a book that I think every high school needs to make its students read before they graduate. And you can visit firesightshare.com/shopping to get the affiliate link to that book. The next book I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. That book, and The Millionaire Next Door are the reasons why I created this channel. I wanted to develop my own unique path to achieve financial independence or financial freedom. I don't know if you know this, but my channel name is actually, well, it's called Fireside Chat, and FIRE stands for Financial Independence and Retire Early. My videos are all about investing, budgeting, and paying off debt. I also have free financial resources that you can download for absolutely free by visiting firesightshare.com/resources. And I also help my private clients achieve financial freedom. And I encourage you to schedule a free session by visiting firesidechat.com/coaching to find out if I'm the right fit for your needs. But anyway, step three was to take control of my money. And I had no idea where my money was going and how much was coming in. This was when I created my own spreadsheet to keep track of my income, expenses, and debt, also known as a budget. It's called a budget, right? 10 years later, I am still trying to perfect my budget because circumstances have changed numerous times. I got remarried, right? Remarried last year. But when I was on my debt-free journey from 2014 to 2016, I wanted to stick to one budget that was going to prioritize paying off my debt. And step number four was to stop the bleeding by not taking out any more debt. That means I had to stop using my credit cards after I made my minimum payments. I threw away my credit cards and strictly used my debit card for the next 2 years. Do I use credit cards now? Absolutely. But I haven't carried a balance on my credit card in 8 years now. Credit cards can become very dangerous if you spend money like I did without a care in the world. But they can also be very rewarding if you budget your expenses and pay your credit cards off every single month. But don't get me wrong, you're not going to be able to build wealth with credit card rewards, right? You should only use them if you're responsible enough to pay them off every single month. And many people believe that paying off debt is all about spreadsheets and math. The fact is that you can't get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle if you can't change your mindset about money. Most of the time, it's about your behavior. You could be making $250,000 a year and still living paycheck to paycheck. I made a video about that because about 35% of Americans making $250,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. That's quite scary to just think about it, right? But there are also people who retire comfortably making less than $100,000 a year. It is all about the mindset and what you do with your money. And just because you're a spender, it doesn't mean that you're going to be terrible at budgeting. I am a natural spender now, but I spend my money with intention. Ever since I became debt free in 2016, I've been able to save, invest, and spend with the money I actually have instead of borrowing from my credit cards. My family and I went to Disney World using a Disney credit card, but I paid the balance in full and earned rewards from it. And I took my wife to New York for a weekend and used the Marriott credit card, but I paid the balance in full and earned extra points by staying at a Marriott near what was that called? Times Square. The point is that if I spend everything I make, I'm going to be broke like I used to be. But if I save everything I make, then I'm not going to have any joy in my life, right? And I found that balance between intentional saving and intentional spending. It was much better when I paid off my debt. And the truth is, there are many people who spend money so that they can feel good about it. There are people who never budget because it's too stressful for them. And I know someone who would hide their debt and never deal with it. And that's also called money avoidance, which is very common in this country. When I realized the amount of debt I had to first overcome my fear, anxiety, and intense worry about my current financial state. Once I've mitigated my negative emotions about money, I started creating a debt payoff plan, which I'm going to show you in the next segment of this live stream. If you're watching this on replay or the clip, just go to my debt payoff playlist and find the next video. Back in 2014, my take-home income for that year was about $2,400 every paycheck on the first and the 15th. And that was about $58,000 a year. In 2015, my income increased to $61,000 or about $2,540 every paycheck on the first and the 15th. Every paycheck was either going to my expenses or debt repayment. If you decide to keep your debt for the long term, your income really doesn't mean much when you're spending half the time repaying them, right? Many of you watching this video may have a car loan, credit card debt, student loans, or other types of personal loans. Those debt repayments are what's holding you back from maximizing your 401k contributions, Roth IRA contributions, or real estate investment. What I needed to do was to figure out how much extra I could pour onto my consumer debt so that I could get out of it as soon as possible. And my minimum payments were about $1,400 a month to repay 108,892.40 in total consumer debt. And to put it from a different perspective, that was $500 more than the apartment rent that I pay for at the time back in 2013. I was desperately trying to get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle. So in December 2013, I decided to sacrifice the next 2 years in 2014 and 2015 to pay off my debt completely so that I could start saving and investing for my financial independence starting in 2016. Fast forward to 2023, I now have over 7 figures in total assets because when I first learned about compound interest growth, that $1,400 a month invested into an S&P 500 index fund for 10 years with a 10% average annual return, returning to almost $300,000. What if I invested $30,000 a year? That would give me $525,000 in 10 years. But I couldn't save or invest with credit card debt hanging over my head. So the first thing I had to do was to get my money under control because I was spending way more than I made. So step number 1 was to make sure that I pay my bills on time. And that sounds like common sense. But this was the very first thing I had to do before I even started paying off my debt. I struggled to pay my bills because my minimum debt repayments were $1,400 per month. But in order to make extra payments on my credit card debt, I had to drastically reduce my overall expenses. And I had to consider the following five categories when it came to budgeting on my debt free journey: housing, utilities, transportation, groceries, and insurance. One, how much do I need to spend each month to put food on the table? Two, how much do I need to spend each month to keep the roof over my head? And three, how much do I need to spend each month to keep the house running, like utilities and electricity? And four, how much do I need to spend each month on transportation to get from point A to point B? Five, how much do I need to pay each month to keep my car insurance, medical insurance, and homeowners or property insurance? And if you have a family with minors in your household, you need to know how much money you spend on average each month to pay for your kids' medical expenses and prescription medications. If you and your spouse both work, how much do you need to spend on childcare and school supplies? When I work with my clients, these are the first things we work on before we even get to the investment portion of your personal finances. You have to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out each month. And that's both pre tax and after tax income. Did I mention anything about keeping my subscriptions? Did I mention anything about dining out? And did I mention anything about traveling? Nope, just the basic expenses. And once I had those figured out, I came up with what's called a 50-50 budget strategy. And 50% of my income was going to the basic living expenses that I just mentioned. And the other 50% of my income was going towards my debt. So, how did I reduce my basic expenses to just 50% of my income, making $58,000 a year? As my income increased in 2014 and 2015, I maintained the same expenses throughout those years. So, at one point, I was able to live on 40% of my income and aggressively repaid my debts with 60% of my income. And keep in mind that I had a 1 year old daughter at the time, turning two. And the next thing I did was to raise cash by selling pretty much anything that I didn't need. And I went through a divorce in 2013. So I had to sell my house and many other things that we owned together to split the profit. I didn't make a lot of profit from selling my house, but it allowed me to pay off my first credit card with a $6,000 balance. And I sold both cars so that I didn't have to pay over $600 a month in car payments. And I sold my clothes and furniture on Craigslist so that I could use that extra cash to pay down my debt. And you'd be surprised how many people will actually pay for things on Craigslist back in the day. Is Craigslist still a thing? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below, okay? And the first thing I completely cut out was going out to eat by myself or having any takeout food. That alone saved me, on average, $500 per month. And I also cut out all of my discretionary spending, like my subscriptions, clothes, or anything that wasn't considered necessary until my debt was completely paid off. And the second thing I did was go to the grocery store and buy these cases of cup ramen noodles. Those cup ramens were like 10 cents each back in 2014, and I would eat them like 2 to 3 times a day. Now it's probably like 25 cents with inflation, but I will never eat these again. And the third thing I did was to plan my meals and grocery runs. And I went to the grocery store every week with a list of all the meals I was going to eat every week. And I try to eat as healthy as possible. But I got to tell you that buying a can of Spam with like 580 milligrams or 600 milligrams of sodium was much cheaper than getting a fresh bag of chicken. It's crazy, right? America. And I bought a large bag of rice and a case of Spam that would last me like a month. And the fourth thing I did was to cut my transportation cost in half by driving to work with my coworkers. I don't know who any of these people are in the picture, but I was paying around $200 a month in gas every single month, right? And when I started ride sharing with my coworkers, I paid around $40 a month in gas. And I did everything I could to save money on gas by just going to the grocery stores, working, picking up and dropping off my daughter at daycare, who was almost 2 years old at the time. And the fifth thing I did was to reduce the cost of my insurance bills. Luckily, the only insurance I had to pay was my car insurance because the military paid for all of my medical and dental bills, including my daughter's. And I just shopped around every car insurance company to lower my insurance bill as much as I could. And to be completely transparent, and I've made several mistakes throughout my debt free journey, and I could have paid down my debt a lot sooner if I didn't make the following mistakes. And mistake number one was to buy a house when I was right in the middle of it. Because even with the mortgage payments being lowered than the rent payments, my housing expenses went up because so many things went wrong as soon as I moved into the house. And I felt like I was in a rush to buy a house because the apartment I was in at the time wanted to raise the rent by almost $100 per month. And mistake number two was that I only had $300 in cash for my rainy day fund. And I should have had at least 1,000 or $1,500 saved in my rainy day fund because those rainy days came as soon as I moved into a house that I bought. And mistake number three was not turning off the 529 college savings plan contributions to my daughter. I could have paid down my debt a lot faster with that extra $100 per month that I contributed to her 529 account. And mistake number four was going on dates while I was in debt. And I should have cut those expenses out, but I can't really regret it because the person I used to go out on dates with is my wife now. But if she had known about my struggle with personal finances, and I think she would have understood and allowed me to cut back on the spending and have like cheap movie nights instead. But anyway, let me share how I prioritize my debt. This was a crucial step because I needed to make as much room in my budget as possible to make extra debt repayments. So what I did was to list my debt from the smallest to the largest, and I had a total of $47,000 in credit card debt with an interest rate of between 19 and 24%. These interest rates were just absolutely killing my budget every single month. You know what Gen Z says, killing my vibes, right? You can say that, right? And the next portion was my fixed interest rate loans, like my personal loan, TSP loan, and two car loans. And the only one with a high interest rate was my personal loan at 12% APR because I had a bad credit score, right? But at the time, I felt like I needed that loan to help pay for my divorce attorney and many other things. And I also borrowed from my TSP, which is the same thing as a 401k, but it's a federal government version of it. And I also had two cars, but one of them came from a divorce. So I just kind of like kept borrowing all those years, right? So what I needed to change, it wasn't so much the spreadsheets, not yet. It was my behavior. I need to change my behavior. I had a serious spending problem. So in order for me to stop the bleeding, I had to stop using my already maxed out credit cards. And I also had to stay very disciplined with my budget because half of that was going towards my debt. And I had a plan in place and I was ready to execute it, right? You need to have the same mindset as well if you're serious about trying to get out of debt. And one of my clients actually just paid off $22,000 in debt in just 7 months. They paid about $3,100 a month towards their debt because they were determined to start saving and investing in their financial independence. And stay tuned because in the next segment of this live stream, I'm going to show you the spreadsheets I used to pay off my debt in 2 years. And if you're watching this on replay, the next clip will be in the debt-free journey playlist if it's not published already. I made a huge financial mess back in 2013, and I was making $58,000 a year in 2014 and $61,000 in 2015. And I had a total of $110,000 in credit card debt, personal loans, and car loans. And I was spending money like I was making $1 million a year. And I never tracked my expenses closely and decided to ignore my problem until one day I thought it would be fun to create my very first net worth statement. And that did not turn out well. And this was my income in 2014. I made $58,000 that year in the military. And luckily, I got promoted from E5 to E6 in October 2014 after turning off my retirement contributions because I was on the old TSP plan without any matches. My paychecks were around $2,450 on the 1st and the 15th. And I kept my expenses under $2,400 every month and used my other $2,500 towards my debt repayment every single month. In 2015, my income increased to $61,000. My paychecks increased by about $100 on the 1st and the 15th. And I still kept my expenses under $2,400 every month and used my other $2,700 towards my debt repayment every single month. And I decided to prioritize my credit cards because those interest rates were just outrageous. These are also variable interest rates. So the rates could go up at any time. So if you've been paying attention to the Federal Reserve, as they raise interest rates, credit card interest rates will go up too. So you should always prioritize, in my opinion, credit cards, buy now, pay later, HELOC, and other variable interest debts to pay off first. Credit cards could cost you anywhere between 20 and 30% in interest. Buy now, pay later debts are just as bad as those credit cards. If you have any payday loans, I would actually prioritize those over your credit cards because they're considered predatory and lending and charge you like 200 or 300% in interest. These high interest debts will destroy your financial future if you don't take care of them now. But listing them by the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate is also known as the debt avalanche method. But as you can see here, that I put the lowest balance at the top, which was Capital One with 19% APR, followed by Star Card with $8,000, another Capital One with $9,000, Chase Freedom with $12,000, and then USAA Visa with $12,000. Since I had the same balance between Chase and USAA, I just prioritized the one with the higher interest rates. Chase had 24% and USAA had 21%. So I prioritized Chase over USAA. The next priority was my fixed interest rate loan because, unlike my credit cards, those interest rates were locked in. So I listed my fixed interest rate loans from the smallest balance to the largest balance, regardless of the interest rate. This is also known as the debt snowball method. You could theoretically put the credit card debt in the snowball method, but I decided against it because the credit card interest rates were just killing me. So my USAA personal loan was $15,000 with a 12% APR, and the minimum payment was $150 per month. My TSP loan, also known as the 401k loan, was $15,000 with a 4% APR, and the minimum payment was $100 a month. And I also had two car loans. The first one was a 2007 Acura with a 4% APR and owed about $20,000. And I also had a 2013 Honda Civic, which was a stupid purchase, with $23,000 and a 4% APR. My total car payments alone were $673 per month, and they were absolutely killing me too. So here's what I did with the Acura. Here's the first step I did. It was from the divorce anyway, so it wasn't something that I was going to keep. I took it to the Acura dealership to find out if they were willing to buy it back. Surprisingly, they took it back, but it was upside down by about $4,500. And luckily, I was able to sell the house that my ex and I own and made a 50-50 profit on the equity from the sale. So I put the profit towards the $4,500 for the Acura loan that I owed, while the dealership paid for the rest of the balance. That alone saved me $313 per month in car payments. And then the very next day, I took my 2013 Honda Civic back to the Honda dealership and asked them if they wanted to buy it back. They actually counter-offered to buy the vehicle back if I leased a 2014 Honda Civic for 3 years for $175 per month, as long as I drove, It was like less than 12,000 miles per year. I thought it was a better deal than paying $360 a month, so I took the deal. But if I had to do it again, I would have sold my Honda Civic as is and bought a piece of crap car for $2,000 or $3,000. So by trading in my vehicle, I saved $498 in monthly payments. My debt was reduced from $108,892.40 to $66,315.17 because I no longer own those vehicles. Now I have more breathing room to tackle my credit card debt, right? Could I pay off $66,000 in debt in 2 years, making $58,000 a year? It is absolutely doable. And I'm going to show you this. This is the debt payoff spreadsheet that I used back in 2013, 2014. And you can download this spreadsheet for absolutely free by visiting firesucher.com/resources. I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how this spreadsheet works, and it's extremely easy for anyone to use. And if you can't see this spreadsheet, what you can do with the YouTube app or on your device or on your tablet, you can actually pinch on the screen and enlarge the spreadsheet. Okay, or the screen. You can zoom in on the screen if you want to. So if you look at the left four columns right here. Okay. The first one here is the total payments I made on the 1st and the 15th. The second column here is the total interest that I paid on the 1st and the 15th. The third column here is the total debt that I have remaining. So as you can see, it slowly decreased, right? From what is it, 59,000, or it was more than that, but all the way down to zero. Okay. And because I got paid on the 1st and the 15th, I made my payments on the 1st and the 15th so that I could pay down my debt a lot faster. Let me know in the comment section down below if you want to get the bi-weekly spreadsheet. So let me go ahead and zoom back out. All right. So the first credit card I paid off was my Capital One MasterCard. Okay. It was the lowest balance out of all 5 credit cards. Luckily, I still had some money left from the sale of my house from the divorce. So I was able to pay $4,000 right here on January 1st. It was around January 2nd or January 3rd. The balance instantly decreased by half. And then on the 15th, I was able to put $1,740 into the same credit card while I was still making minimum payments on my other credit cards and personal loans. I made extra payments towards Capital One Master up to the maximum budget of $2,450. So by February 1st, right here, I just paid off the remaining $283.53. I still had to pay $4.42 in interest because I still had a balance on my credit card. Okay, that makes sense so far, right? So this is paid off. The next thing I went to was my Star Card. Okay, this was the military Star Card. When I paid off my first credit card, I had that extra $60 per month in my budget because that was the minimum payment for Capital One Master in the first debt that I paid off. So I just did the snowball method by paying at least $1,000 on the 1st and the 15th. This one, I felt like it took a while because I still had to make minimum payments on my other debts. So it took me about 4.5 months to pay off $8,000 for the military Star Card. Your first and second credit cards will always feel like they take the longest. And man, I had to budget really, really hard for those first 2 credit cards because I had so many other debts that I had to pay just the minimum payments, right? And this was paid off as of May 15, 2014. So starting on June 1st, I moved on to Capital One Visa card. I told you I was a mess, okay? And this was when I started to feel the momentum going for me because now I have $140 freed up every month from the first 2 credit cards that I no longer paid. So I paid about $1,100 on the first and about $1,000 on the 15th. And I paid off on September 15th, which was a total down here of $8,912.36 in principal and $831.16 in interest. So in 9 months, I've paid off 3 credit cards, okay? But I made a mistake in September 2014 by purchasing a house for $180,000. In hindsight, most of you would say this was a great purchase because the housing market was at the near bottom at the time, right? $180,000. You're not going to find out anywhere now. But the problem was that I was still in debt. So what happened as soon as I moved into my new house? My water tank just exploded one night, and that cost me $800 to just clean it up and replace it. My garbage disposal stopped working a few days later, and that cost me about $400 in labor in replacement. One of my toilets stopped working, and that's probably because my daughter probably put a toy in there that just clogged up the entire toilet, and that cost me another $300 for plumbing and replacement parts. So within the first month I moved into my house, I had to pay $1,500 in repair, and I got to tell you, bad things do come in threes. Okay, and remember I mentioned earlier that I only had $300 in cash. Well, I ended up borrowing $1,200 to make the repairs happen, which delayed my debt-free journey by about a month. Starting in October, I moved on to the 4th credit card with $12,000. At this point, I freed up 230 bucks in minimum payments from paying off my first three credit cards. At the same time, because I continued to pay down my credit card, my credit balance actually decreased by a few $100s. Hooray. I also called Chase and asked to pause on minimum payment requirements for 3 months for hardship. You can do the same thing. You can actually call the bank. It really depends on the bank, okay? And find out if they can put your credit card on forbearance. The maximum time that I heard was like maybe 6 months. It's not like a mortgage forbearance during COVID. They're not gonna just let you do it for 12 months, 24 months. It's not the same as the student loans either. Credit cards are a little bit tricky because that is actually one of the largest revenue streams for every bank. Okay, think about that for a second. And the downside of doing the forbearance is that also my interest just continue to accrue during the forbearance. So I could just pause on the minimum payments, but they still charge me interest. So because my credit card was already maxed out, that means it was going to go over the limit. What happens when you go over the limit? They charge you extra fees for that. Think about that. And this one took me a while because it had the second highest balance at $12,000. So it ended up taking me 7 months from October 2014 until April 2015 to completely pay it off. Okay. When I paid that off, I remember, man, feeling really good about it because, man, 12 grand. But then I was like, man, I don't want to take another 7 months to pay it off. When I got to my very last credit card, a miracle happened. I applied for what's called a SCRA, which stands for Service Members Civil Relief Act, with Chase and Capital One. Okay, so if you've ever served in the military, active duty, guard, reserve, I believe you have to be active duty though. You have to be on active orders. You can apply for what's called a Service Members Civil Relief Act or the Military Lending Act. So they see that you've deployed. I've deployed in the past. I've gone to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait in the past. They saw that and they say, all right, we're going to lower your interest rates. Some of the debts that I had were actually carried over from before I joined the military and during my military service. Chase and Capital One decided to lower my interest rates from 24% to 4%. Spread the words. Let your buddies know. If you know any veteran friends or people who are serving in the military, let them know about the SCRA and apply for it if they're some massive credit card debt or if they're trying to pay off a credit card debt. Because I got a $5,500 refund from Chase and Capital One for the 20% interest rate difference since inception. It was like $3,500 from Capital One because I had two credit cards with them and another $2,000 from Chase for having that Chase Freedom Card. The only bank that didn't lower my interest rate was USAA, which was surprising because all they do is serve the people in our US Armed Forces. But $2,500 of that paid off the remaining balance on my USAA Visa card. And I was done with my credit cards, but I still had two more loans that I had to pay off. And because I continued to pay down my personal loan by making minimum payments all the way back from January to here in August 2015, my balance decreased from $9,000 to $7,000. And I used that check that I got from Capital One and Chase, paid $3,000 off on my personal loan, and then paid off the remaining balance by October 1st, 2015. And then there was one last one. That was my TSP loan. You see how just everything snowballed into one debt after another, okay? But this was a tricky one because I had to send, it was weird. TSP does it weird. They wanted me to send a $100 check every single month to the TSP. I had to mail it. There was no digital or none of that. It was to mail it. The loan was already at a 4% fixed interest rate. So my loan was reduced from $9,000 in January 2014 to $7,500 in September 2015. So I had to call TSP to make sure that it was okay to make extra repayments on my loan, and they were fine with it. So I sent a check in the amount of about $2,800 on October 1st, $2,600 in November, and then the remaining balance was about it was $2,095.25 in December 2015. Okay, if you've ever dealt with TSP, you know how slow they process just about everything. So I had to wait about 10 days for the check to get to TSP and another 10 days for that balance to apply to the loan. I saw a $0 balance on the TSP loan on January 2nd, 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the day I became debt free. And as soon as I mailed my check, before I even got to January 2nd, as soon as I mailed my check in the first week of December, you know what I did? I went out to eat sushi all by myself that night. And I remember having just tears of joy because that's how excited I was to be debt free. My income on average was around $60,000 a year in take home income. My paychecks were around $2,450 on the 1st and the 15th. I did everything in my power to keep my total expenses at $2,400. My other $2,400 went to my debt repayments. I was literally living on ramen noodles, which I will never eat again. Not the actual ramen, but the cup noodles. Okay, and spam musubi almost every day, if not every other day. But I still didn't tell anyone about my debt free journey until I started my YouTube channel in late 2021 because I was still embarrassed about my stupid financial decisions. But I decided to tell this story today because I know there are many Americans who are in a similar situation. So, in summary, here's how I prioritize my debt. I understand that everyone has their own method, and many financial experts might even say it's not exactly the fastest way to pay down debt, but this was my method and what worked for me. If you're my client, I do what works for you and the fastest way to pay down your debt. But because I had 5 maxed out credit cards, I used the debt avalanche method by prioritizing my credit cards over my car loans, personal loans, and the TSP loan. My credit cards had variable interest rates, and they were anywhere between 19 and 24%. Those interest rates were hurting me the most as far as my cash flow goes. So I decided to prioritize paying off my credit cards over fixed interest loans. The debt avalanche method is to prioritize your debt, highest interest rates, regardless of the balance. The snowball method is when you prioritize paying off the debt from the smallest balance to the largest balance, regardless of the interest rate. So if you look back at my debt payoff spreadsheet, I paid off the credit card with the smallest balance first and then paid off the largest balance last. When I paid off the first credit card, I was able to pay the second credit card with more money because the minimum payment on the first credit card went to my second credit card. When I paid off my second credit card, I used the minimum payments from the first 2 credit cards and applied to the third credit card. That's why it's called the snowball method, because the snowball got bigger and bigger as it rolled down the hill, right? Hear me out, okay? This is gonna sound a little harsh here, but I want you to hear me out. Behavior is everything if you ever wanna get out of the paycheck to paycheck cycle. These are some of the comments that I see that people leave on my videos. I don't have time. I don't earn enough. I don't know how to budget because it is too hard. I'll worry about it later. Debt is just a part of my life. My spouse and I don't get involved with our finances. I spend money to feel better about myself. I did that. Guilty of that. I did that. I'm waiting for the government to forgive my loans. Keep waiting, okay? Just keep waiting. Look, I'm gonna give you the truth that you probably don't wanna hear. Nobody else or the government gives a crap about your debt. The only person who can solve your debt problem is you. When I coach my clients, I don't tell them what to do. I never do. I give them the tools and guidance so that they can make an informed decision to pay down the debt fast. One of my clients just paid off $22,800 in debt in just 7 months. They had debts with buy now, pay later, a truck, and some credit cards. Did the government give them money? No, they didn't. Did they consolidate their loans? Absolutely not. Did they need to file for bankruptcy? Not at all. I gave them the tools they needed, and they changed their behavior with spending. I know it sounds like I'm marketing, but I'm not. You can find all of these resources anywhere. There are some YouTube channels, they charge you money so that you can download their courses or whatever. You can download all of my resources for free. If you don't want to talk to me at all, that's fine. Just go get those resources, get those free spreadsheets. I don't care what you do with them. But my clients, they couldn't start investing in their Roth IRAs, 401k, and saving for travel until they had these debts paid off. That's why they prioritized paying off those buy now, pay later credit cards and truck loan. If you're in a similar situation, I really encourage you to schedule a free session with me by visiting firestarter.com/coaching. I am all about helping people get out of debt because I remember what that was like. It was emotionally draining for me to look at almost $110,000 in total debt. But that $47,000 in credit card debt was the most stressful one because the interest rates were just outrageously high. If you have credit card debt and invest at the same time, you're not making anything in return. You're making maybe a 10% return on investment while repaying 25% in credit card interest rate. So your net return is actually negative 15%, right? The good news was that I had some pay increases in 2014 and 2015 that helped me repay my debt faster. By the end of 2016, I left active duty military and found a job in the private sector that paid over 6 figures in income. But that was 10 months after I became debt free. So why should you wait until your income increases to start tackling your debt? I didn't want to wait. I was making $58,000 a year, $61,000 a year. I didn't want to wait. I didn't have to wait until I made more money to do it. If you're ever doubting yourself whether you can pay off your debt, you shouldn't, because I know you can. Would you make some sacrifices for the next 12 months so that you can save, invest, and travel wherever you want to go? Because I'll tell you that the 2 years I sacrificed were so worth it. I'm all about helping you achieve your financial freedom so that you can build generational wealth. I encourage you, please download all of my financial resources for absolutely free by visiting firestarter.com/resources. And if you want to schedule your one-time free coaching session, you can visit firestarter.com/coaching. For all the paid coaching sessions, the prices are on firestarter.com/pricing. This has been another beast of a video, and I hope you got a lot out of it.